I wanted to be at Texas State. I chose to be at Texas State. I'm from Texas. That was important to me. I always knew if the right guy got this job, you better watch out.
You better watch out. This is Win Now or Get Bent, episode 244. If you don't already know, I'm Cap Tardello, coming to you on Thursday, August 27th. And our Pac-12 101 series continues with the Fresno State Bulldogs. We've got another guest for this episode, Al Scott of the Fresno Sports Magazine. He's the editor over there, Fresno Sports Magazine, FresnoSportsMag.com. If you want to check out their work, we're going to go over the Bulldogs. Lots of good stuff. Matt Ince in his second year as the head coach for these Bulldogs, a really good coach himself, coming over from North Dakota State. I guess he was at USC right before Fresno, but at North Dakota State, he had a lot of success as their head coach. And we'll get into it because we get into it with our guy, Al Scott. Looking forward to you hearing this one. But before we get there, this episode is brought to you by TGC LLC, the GalindoCollective.com, TGC LLC, the GalindoCollective.com. That's GALINDO, the GalindoCollective.com, a team of professional consultants dedicated to helping others realize their business potential through people, planning, and practice. Their services cover a wide range of areas such as business strategy, marketing, human resources, and financial planning. If you own property or a business and want to maximize its profitability, contact TGC at thegalindocollective.com. That's GALINDO, thegalindocollective.com, and follow their social media platforms on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at TGC_LLC, and on Instagram and Facebook at the Galindo Collective on those platforms. Shout out to my guy, Rick Galindo, a Texas State grad, a true Texas State sicko. This is season number 4. The Galindo Collective is partnered with Win Now or Get Bent, so cannot thank them enough. Go check them out, thegalindocollective.com. That's GALINDO, thegalindocollective.com. This episode is also brought to you by Family First Cremation Services. Family First Cremation Services. When your family is facing the loss of a loved one, you deserve compassionate care, honest guidance, and transparent pricing, not high-pressure sales tactics. Family First Cremation Services is locally owned and operated by Diane Lee, a licensed funeral director with more than 20 years of experience, offering affordable cremation, burial, memorial, and pre-planning services tailored to your family's wishes. They proudly serve families from their location in Magnolia, Texas. For immediate assistance, call 979-588-2509. That's 979-588-2509. Or visit FamilyFirstCremationServices.com. That's FamilyFirstCremationServices.com. Family First Cremation Services, providing dignified, affordable care when your family needs it most. All right, let's get to these Bulldogs. Doesn't sound right, you know? Don't worry, this is back-to-back days for a pod. I'm gonna put out another one for Utah State on Friday. I've got some interviews set up for San Diego State and Boise State. So I'm planning to drop all of these throughout the weekend so that we can focus on Texas next week for the Bobcats. Bobcats have a big opponent to start the season in Austin. We're going to have lots of coverage there, so we'll have to clear out, get these Pac-12 101 series done, because I meant to have them done before now. Wanted to do them before the season. I'm still on schedule to have them done, but I wanted them done a little earlier in fall camp, but that's okay because it's still been a success. I've had a lot of fun going through all of these teams and getting to know some of these other reporters, people on the beat in the new Pac-12 for this revived conference that we have. It's been a lot of fun. But we're on to Fresno State, the Fresno State Bulldogs in the Pac-12 conference. Like I said, Al Scott coming up a little bit later. I'm going to do a little bit of preliminary coverage of the Fresno State Bulldogs, a little preliminary tutorial about some of their history and what's currently going on before we jump into that great interview with Al Scott. You think you're really going to enjoy that. Guy knows a lot about the Fresno State Bulldogs. But let's go through it. Their history, they first played first season of football, 1921 for Fresno State. They've been a part of, looks like 7 conferences here over the years, including the Pac-12. They were independent their very first year, and then independent again from 1942 to 1945, and then independent again 1951 to 1952. They've had a 3 periods of independence for the Fresno State Bulldogs. But from 1922 to 1924, they were in the California Coast Conference. 25 to 39, they were in the Far Western Conference, although they had dual conference membership in the FWC and the CCAA in 1939. The CCAA is the California Collegiate Athletic Association, where the Fresno State Bulldogs were there from 1939 to 1941, again from 46 to 50, and then back in it from 53 to 68. Bulldogs joined the Big West Conference from 1969 to 1991. I believe there was a name change there, right? Yeah, okay. It was the Pacific Coast Athletic Conference in 1969. From 1969 to 1987, that conference changed its name to the Big West Conference from 1987. And that's where Fresno State was until 1991. 1992, they joined the WAC, a conference we are familiar with here at Texas State. The Bobcats were in that conference for precisely 1 season. The Bulldogs were in it from 1992 to 2011. Then they joined the Mountain West Conference from 2012 to 2025 before joining some of their other Mountain West Conference brethren and going to the Pac-12. Feels like a nice fit for Fresno, right there in California, being in the Pac-12. Across all those conferences I just named, the Bulldogs have 28 conference championships in their history. Some of the more recent ones, I won't go all the way back through some of them, but 3 times they won the Big West in 88, 89, and 91, so 3 out of 4 years there. 3 times they won the WAC, 92, 93, and 1999, and 4 times the Bulldogs won the Mountain West Conference, 2012, 2013, 2018, and 2022. In the Bulldogs' history, there are 4 top 25 finishes for Fresno State. Number 24 in 1992, number 22 in 2004, number 18 in 2018, and number 24 in 2022. 32 bowl game appearances since 1921, including winning 6 of its last 7, 4-1 in bowl appearances over the last 5 years. So they've made 5 consecutive bowls, have won all but one. That was the one, not this last one, but the one before that. They lost. At least 9 wins in 4 of the last 5 seasons. 9 wins in 4 of the last 5 seasons. That's really impressive for this program, especially when you consider that one that they didn't get 9 wins. They were 6-7. That 7th loss was in a bowl game, a losing record at 6-7. But as far as losing records go, that's about as respectable as it gets in college football. You got to bowl eligibility. You lost in the bowl game. Matt Ince is in his 2nd season at the helm for the Bulldogs. 9-4 finish last season. His first year was pretty successful after going 9-4. I mentioned it a little bit at the top. He was the North Dakota State coach for a good while. What was that, 2019 to 2023? But he worked there for a while before there, as well as an assistant coach before taking over as head coach in 2019. 1 year at USC before going to Fresno State. He was an assistant to the associate head coach and linebackers coach. I believe I have that title right. I didn't write it down, but that's where he was. There was 1 year between North Dakota State and Fresno State, and he was at USC. As a head coach, he is 69-15, and a lot of that's FCS, North Dakota State, but still 69-15, 1-0 in bowl games. The one bowl game last season for Fresno State, and he's 15-3. Record in the FCS playoffs with 2 national championships in 2019 and 2021. The Bulldogs got themselves a heck of a coach in Matt Ince. Into fall camp, something that Al Scott and I talk about. I talked to Al on Sunday of this week, and after we got done speaking, he was like, hey, they might decide their quarterback, looking potentially by Tuesday. So if that does happen, let me know, and we can throw it on the pod beforehand. But that quarterback battle is still going on. from stuff that I'm seeing, it doesn't seem like Matt Ince is going to name a quarterback until right before the game starts or the week leading into it potentially. But it's a quarterback battle between Christian Martin, a Maryland transfer, and incumbent Jaden Mandel. So Martin, 2 seasons at Maryland before transferring to Fresno State, originally from Virginia. He only made 5 appearances with 1 touchdown pass. 6'4", 230 pounds. It's got that quintessential quarterback size that you like to see. Some meat on those bones as well at 230. Don't mind if he decides not to slide sometimes. Might be able to take it. Although I say that, but anybody can get a hard hit and out for the season. But Mandel, 4th season at Fresno State. He missed all of last year with an injury, and he redshirted his first year in 2023. So the only time he got onto the field was in 2024. Really limited appearance. Only had 9 pass attempts. 2 of those were picked off. So he hasn't played a whole lot. So, but he is the incumbent. He knows he's a local product, I believe, in the state of California. He knows that system there at Fresno State. Those are his advantages over someone like Christian Martin, and he is also in his 4th year, a lot of experience. Like, yeah, he had that game where he had 2 picks, but he still was able to get out onto the field and get some FBS experience. That being said, it does feel like Christian Martin has a lead. Even when talking to Al Scott, that feels like that's where everybody is leaning with Christian Martin there at Fresno State. But I'll say this, and not this. It's the quarterback is the most important position in team sports, in my opinion. I don't think there is a position in any team sport that gets a lot more responsibilities leaned onto them. Although I would hear an argument where players have to play offense and defense. But I digress. Quarterback is extremely important. But for Fresno State and Matt Ince is a defensive coach, and this is a defensive team that they have with the Bulldogs. So they don't need someone to go out and win the Heisman. They really need someone maybe a little bit better than a game manager. Not just they really just need to keep the ball away from the other team. They have a pretty solid defense. The Fresno State Bulldogs do. Defense last season for Fresno State, they finished 10th in total defense, allowing 285.7 yards per game, and 16th in scoring defense, 18.7 points per game. So that's nationally. It's top 10 in total defense and top 16 for scoring defense. Is pretty impressive stuff out of Fresno State. Uh, Probably the most defensive-minded team in the conference, especially with Matt Ince at the helm. But that'll do it. That'll wrap it up before we get to Al Scott. Great stuff coming up from Al Scott. Again, he is the editor at the Fresno Sports Magazine. You can find them at fresnosportsmag.com. Follow their Twitter account at Fresno Sports Mag. You can follow my guy Al Scott at Al Scott 1998. Our Pac-12 101 series here at Win Now or Get Bent continues with the Fresno State Bulldogs. I am joined by Al Scott, the editor at the Fresno Sports Magazine, fresnosportsmag.com. You can also follow them on Twitter at Fresno Sports Mag. He also does his own podcast, Al Things Considered. Love that name. And he also does a weekly segment on the Pac-12 Daily Podcast talking about Fresno State. Al Scott, how are things in California, man?
Things are hot and they're ready for football season. Less than 2 weeks away, 13 days until the Bulldogs try to take over the LA Coliseum and try to upset the Trojans.
Yeah, that's a big one to start the season. We have that too over here in Texas. We have the Longhorns right off the bat in Austin, so it's going to be a tough one for both sides. You're gonna be at that game? Obviously, it's there in California.
Yeah, I'll be at that game, ready to kick things off. It's not necessarily one that I think Fresno State fans are, expecting, Fresno State to, come in there and win. But I think you got to give yourself a chance. This Fresno State team is coming off a 9-4 season. They seemingly have a solid team coming back. They didn't lose a lot of talent, and so you're going to go into LA with the belief that you can, play anyone, anytime, anywhere, as Pat Hill likes to say. But yeah, we're excited. I'm excited for sure.
You know they're going to bring some tough defense, that's for sure. And it's kind of it's a little poetic that it's a former Pac-12 team playing Fresno State
Playing
in
a
in
new
their
Pac-12.
right, their first official Pac-12 game for Fresno State. Just a little bit of perspective on the Pac-12 and what it means for Fresno State. What are the feelings around this? I can imagine they're similar to what they are here in San Marcos, where there's a lot of excitement, even though it's not the old Pac-12, it's the new revived Pac-12. It's kind of our own thing. What are the feelings around Bulldog fans?
I think it's mainly excitement. It is a little bit tempered expectations. You mentioned or we talked about USC being the old Pac-12. For several years, Fresno State was trying to get into the old Pac-12 along with Boise and San Diego State. And, arguments over the TV deal, it never came to fruition. I think the closest it got, there was a sort of an agreed deal with ESPN to bring on Boise and Fresno State. And if I remember correctly, Stanford and Cal sort of nixed that deal. Um, and maybe a couple other schools, but it's been something Fresno State has had long been in the works of trying to get into the Pac-12, and now it's a completely different type of conference. Obviously, you still have Oregon State and Washington State, but it is a new conference. I do still think that it's better than what it was or what Fresno State is coming from. It is an improved conference. You're taking pretty much the best schools from the previous Mountain West Conference, and you're adding, two solid, legacy conference members in Oregon State and Washington State, plus the addition of Texas State and not we're not in basketball season yet, but Gonzaga for basketball and other sports, excluding football. I think it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, that this conference, especially being the regionality for Fresno State right there on the West Coast, it just seems to make a lot of sense for the Bulldogs to be right there in the Pac-12. You mentioned it a little earlier at the top, 9-4 last season for Fresno. Matt Ince in his first season coming over from USC. More poetry for that very first game. Coming over, bringing a tough defense. 9-4 season. Going into his second year. We've known Matt Ince. I mentioned he came over from USC, but before that, North Dakota State was there for a long time to much success. I'm sure I wrote his 60-11 as the head coach at North Dakota State. So he brought a lot of pedigree to Fresno. Talk about Matt Ince and what he's brought to the Bulldogs, what he's like, just to in that program, the culture that he's building.
Winning will solve everything. And when he came into this program, there was a lot of unsettled feelings among the Red Wave fan base. The previous head coach, who was the interim head coach, Tim Skipper, was a former Bulldog linebacker and had coached several years for Fresno State. And Skip, in his 1 year as the interim job, he went 6-7. And even then, Fresno State fans, they loved him. They wanted him back. But Garrett Classy, athletic director, recently extended by Fresno State. Decided he wanted to pick his own guy, and he brought in Matt Ince, and Ince has done nothing but win the support of his fan base. And I think a lot of that comes down to winning. I think a lot of it also comes down to the importance and intentionality that he has put into making the fan base a priority and intention to make the alumni a priority. Like he's making the right things matter. And I think that if you do all of those things and you go out and win football games, it doesn't matter if you're from here. It doesn't matter, how much ties you have, into the local community. They People want a winner at the end of the day.
You mentioned the AD getting that extension. I've seen a lot of praise for him. Just to talk about him a little bit and what he's brought to the Bulldogs and what he's changed really with everything that's happened in the landscape when we move into the Pac-12, all of that.
Yeah, Garrett Classy, he came over. He's very innovative. I will also say he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. He's really brought. He's very much a valley guy. He cares very much about agriculture. He knows how much importance that is to the fan base. And I think that's something that really stood out, from the very opening press conferences. He realized that is something that is a priority among these fans. Um, he went out and secured a very large deal with Wonderful, the company, for a jersey patch deal for Wonderful pistachios, the Halo oranges, and Wonderful Palm, the pomegranates. And so they're putting, a jersey patch on every single athletic sports team at Fresno State, not just football. And it's a one of a kind sponsorship. They're, doing things with, various things. They're replacing the hot dog contest with um, you know, uh, a pistachio and like orange and pomegranate, and it's just things like that. Like there's little things throughout the game that you could sell in order to make money. And Classy has realized that if you're going to generate funds, you've got to be creative, and he's done that. They changed broadcast partnerships this offseason, or well, this last year, and they're doing something that really hasn't been done in a while in college sports, which is they're basically producing their own thing. It's called Bulldog Sports Enterprises, and they're an extension of the university. Um, but yeah, they're all bought in. Classy has been innovative from the start. He's willing to try new things, things that not anyone else is willing to do. And I think that Fresno State and the administration there, they see that and they love it. And there's a reason why he's now the highest paid, director of athletics among all group of 6 schools. It's because they're seeing the fruit of that success. And I've got to say I'm all for it.
Fresno State. I feel like they're a little underappreciated out there with this, with everything going on. A lot of talk about Boise State, obviously, and then Washington State, Oregon State. They're the Pac-12 OGs, but Fresno State, some good success in the 2020s. It's an up and coming program, I feel. But let's talk about on the field a little bit. What's going on with the football team? Obviously, Matt Ince has a tough defense. We know that about them. We know they have a tough offensive line. It seems like the big question around the Bulldogs is quarterback. Who's going to be the starter?
Yeah.
It seems like it's between Christian Martin, a Maryland transfer, and Jaden Mandel, who's a returner. What's that? What are you hearing? What's your ear to the ground in fall camp there for Fresno State, and how that quarterback battle's wearing out?
Well, the Fresno State coaching staff, they're pretty in unison on this is a 50-50 battle. We'll find out this week. Menace is expected to announce on Tuesday or Wednesday who that starting quarterback at USC will be. Well, we noticed last year something is that just because you're named a quarterback in week one doesn't mean you're going to be the quarterback throughout the year. Last season, EJ Warner, son of Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner, was the quarterback for most of the year. But midway through the season, he lost the job to Carson Conklin, who's now back at Sacramento State, and they'll see him for their home opener. But they then Conklin had the job for 3 games, and then he lost it again, and then they brought back Warner. So I would give the edge right now to Christian Martin. I mean, that's the guy that they paid the big bucks for in NIL transfer money. Um, Jaden, even though he's healthy right now, he is coming off a year where he didn't play any football last season. He was hurt all season. And so I think, looking at those two things, if I had to give an edge, I'd pick Martin. Um, but it's not if Martin goes out there and he doesn't meet the expectations that Madden is looking for, he's not afraid to go with Jaden. I think the biggest thing about this quarterback room is, from a talent perspective, I think that it has the quarterback room for the last several years beat. But there's no experience. Martin and Mendel are the only guys who have played college football games. They brought in 2 early enrollee freshmen, one of which, Deacon Rose, is a local 4-star recruit, one of the biggest recruits in Fresno State history. Derek Carr played a role in getting Deegan to Fresno. I don't think he'll see reps this year, but that is a guy to look out for. And as he continues to get reps in practice and getting familiar with the playbook, that is something to look at in the future for. And then Jonathan Kraft, redshirt freshman, is back, as well as probably that third guy. Pretty athletic on his feet. But yeah, it comes down to Jaden and Christian. I think Jaden played a couple years ago in the bowl game. He played in, I think, 2 other games. Besides like 2-point conversions and like special opportunities. And Jaden, he he had some success, but he had more, downs than goods. And I think that you're looking at a completely new guy. And I think that you have to look at both of these guys with a fresh set of eyes. When Christian, he played last year for Maryland, every single rep that he saw was in a blowout. He was playing against, second and third string guys in the Big Ten, which, if you think about it, I mean, second and third string guys in the Big Ten, they might not be that far off what you're seeing in the Mountain West or the Pac-12 rather. Um, but I think game situations matter. You won't know until you actually see the field.
Is he a Matt Ince recruit? Or is he from
No,
the last regime?
he's actually been here for a few different coaching regimes. He was brought in with Coach Tedford, and then he played under Coach Tim Skipper, and then for Matt Ince, and so he's been here for a few years. If I remember the stat correctly, there's been about 13 quarterbacks that came and left in the time that Jaden has been here, and so he has been around a lot of different guys in that quarterback room, and
Wow.
so yeah, and he's the guy that stuck around. He grew up not too far away. He grew up not too far away from Fresno State. Was down the road. Guy that, um, frankly, he wanted to be a Bulldog from the beginning, and I think that a guy that came to games growing up as a kid, that dream of being that guy long term. I think that is something that is motivating him.
Well, whoever the quarterback is, it seems like they're going to have a really good offensive line protecting for them. So, with the strong offensive line, nice running back room with Bryson Donaldson and Rashawn Luke. Do you think that'll be a strength of this offense running the ball, considering that line and what they have in the backfield?
Yeah, I mean, a lot is to be made of the uh, unknown quarterback room, but what is known is that Fresno State is bringing back two very strong tackles in Roland Fullwood and Braden Walton, and then that running back room they've got. I I'll give Lucky Sutton and who's the Boise State guy? Why am I forgetting his name? Um, Boise State starting running back, and then San Diego State's Lucky Sutton are probably the two best running backs in the conference. But I would put Bryson and Rayshawn, in that top five. And I think that as far as duos go, there's not a better running back duo in the conference. I think both of those guys have true running RB1 potential. Rayshawn is as dynamic of a player in the conference offensively. He's not necessarily a guy you're going to hand the ball off to 25 times a game, but he's a guy that you can hand the ball in the backfield. You can throw it to him out wide. He's a guy that will take off, punt returns and kick returns. He's a guy that really can do it all, and he's truly one of the fastest guys in the country. And I think that's something to be made of. Bryson's a guy that coming off, he played through some injuries last year, but he had a game last year where nearly 200 yards and a few touchdowns. I think that he's a guy that truly could be an 1,000-yard rusher this year.
Yeah, it's something to watch for sure. And obviously we've made a lot about the defense. A lot of people have a real tough defense there at Fresno State. I have here they were 10th nationally last year in yards per game, allowing 285.7 yards total per game, and 16th in points allowed per game with 18.77. I mean, a lot of these Pac-12 teams are very offensive oriented. It feels like Fresno State is going the other way. A very defensive-minded coach, a very defensive-minded squad. What do you think that means for this team going into the Pac-12? How important this defense is going to be?
I'm curious to see who steps up. I think the biggest thing for this defense is the front seven is almost completely back. They didn't really lose a lot there. They lost a couple edge rushers, but they kept a lot of interior defensive line talent, and I think that's something that really helps the back line in the secondary. The linebacker room is all the same except for Jaden Pearson, who's now playing the Canadian Football League. And so they brought back Kavion Thunderbird, who missed half of last season with an injury, but he's as good of a linebacker as there is in this conference from a talent perspective. In the secondary, they graduated Cameron Braca and Alexander Hamilton, who shout out had a pick for the Rams on Sunday. He's been killing it for LA. But beyond that, I think that this team just they brought back a lot of talent. They didn't lose a single starter to the portal on defense. They lost one on offense, Richie Anderson to Texas A&M, and so they're bringing back a lot of guys that just simply bought into this program. They bought into Nick Benedetto's defense and Matt Entz and the type of program that they're trying to build. And that's something that you hear throughout fall camp over and over again is that we're bought in. We're doing this as brothers. Simeon Harris is a guy that could be challenging for Conference Defensive Player of the Year. He led them out west in interceptions last year. He's a guy that really thrived as a leader this offseason and heading into fall camp as a guy that is going to take charge, as a guy that is going to, be that vocal leader on this defense.
For the outlook on the season, how are you feeling the Bulldogs are going to fare this upcoming season? First year in the Pac-12, coming off a 9-4 season, a lot of newness in the conference. I think you were saying it before we recorded, 9 games in California for Fresno, so a somewhat favorable schedule as far as travel is concerned. What are you feeling after observing this team?
I think expectations are 3-1 in non-conference. Obviously, I'm not expecting them to go into USC and winning. Obviously, that'd be great. I don't think it's impossible. I'm not expecting them to come out with a victory, though. I would say if they can go into the Coliseum and make things tough, that will sort of help lead them into the 3 non-conference games that they have, which are all very winnable: Sacramento State, Rice, and San Jose State. And then I think you get to non-conference, and I think the goal is 6 to 7 wins. Obviously, you want to beat Boise and San Diego State. Those are the two, at least for Fresno State, that are you've got circled on your map as okay. This is a little bit. We need extra intensity. Not that the other games don't matter, but rivalry games, especially in conference rivalry games, they matter a whole ton. And Fresno State split those two last year. They lost at home on homecoming to San Diego State, and then they went out to Boise and beat the brakes on the Broncos. And so, this year it's flipped. They're hosting Boise, but they're playing at San Diego. Um, I think if they can win either of those games, I think that this is a very winnable conference. I think that they are as good as any other team in this conference from a talent perspective. I think that they're in that top 3 conversation. If you had Boise or San Diego State ahead of them, I'm not going to refute you. Um, Outside of that, though, I mean, I think that a 9 to 10 win season is very doable. Um, I don't know if they're quite college playoff team. I don't think that they're at that tier level. But you don't know until you play. I think having good health and going out there and winning football games and relying on that defense is a great start, though.
I know for myself with Texas State, they have a very favorable home schedule. But if I have one for sure loss, not for sure loss, but one loss in my season prediction, that's Fresno when they come to town. I think that defense going up against this offense where it'll slow the game down, and that's not what the Bobcats want. And they'll have to go at Matt Entz's pace. I think they're going to be a lot better than some are anticipating. I've heard some people be like, "Oh, who's going to be the quarterback?" When you have
Yeah.
a solid running game and a solid defense, you almost just kind of need a game manager. You don't need someone to be spectacular. You just need them to not lose you the game. So I'm very high on Fresno
Texas,
State.
yeah, Texas State might have the offensive player of the year this year, and
I
I
think
don't think
so.
that's going to matter much against Fresno State. They're a team that very much forces opposing teams to run the ball.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think a lot of that comes down to guys like Simeon Harris. Fresno State forces a lot of interceptions. They force a lot of turnovers. I was, you know, they're a team that really pushes the button. They focus a lot in practice on getting the ball. They want the ball in their hands and handing it back to their offense. That does leave them prone to big plays at times, but it wasn't really much of a problem last year. They were on the winning end of those aggressive play types a lot more often than not.
Fresno State. Well, hey, Al Scott, this was amazing. Thank you for carving out some time to talk about the Bulldogs. Once again, it's Al Scott. He's the editor at the Fresno Sports Magazine. Check them out at FresnoSportsMag.com. Follow them on Twitter at Fresno Sports Mag. Al Things Considered is Al Scott's podcast. Go check that out in a Pac-12 Daily Podcast weekly segment over Fresno State. Al, thank you once again for doing this. I can't wait for this season.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much from Al Scott. Great stuff there from the Fresno State Bulldogs. Make sure you check out our YouTube page if you're not on there. If you are, thank you. Hello. Great to see you. If not, youtube.com/@WinNowOrGetBit. Make sure you get on there, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. If you know anybody who went to Fresno State, sign them up. They might enjoy this episode. Check us out on Twitter at WinNowOrGetBent. Check us out on Instagram and TikTok at WNOGB. Thank you so much to TGC LLC, 4th season, partnered with Win Now or Get Bent. Thank you to Family First Cremation Services. And of course, and thank you to Al Scott. I got to give another nice thank you to my guy, Al Scott. And of course, thank you to you sickos out there for always tuning in. Without you, we'd be shouting into the void. But because of you, we were able to follow these Bobcats into the Pac-12, into the belly of the beast against the Texas Longhorns next week in Austin. That's going to be a heck of one. I promise you, we'll get through these Pac-12 101 series, and I got lots of great stuff for you. I have an interview with Mike Harge at AM 1300 The Zone in Austin, talking about Texas State. He's got a lot of love for Texas State. That's why I knew I had to get him on to talk about these Bobcats. We're going to have great stuff for you coming up next week and going into the season. Oh, yeah, man. Until then, though, win now or get bent.